Welcome to another episode of Fight the Burnout. Today we have a non-police officer. So the last few episodes have been police officers. Today we have a firefighter medic, Ryan Rodriquez, from just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. I love Arizona. But he's going to tell us all about kind of what he does, who he is, why he loves what he does so much still, and some experiences with his burnout. But as we always do, Ryan, one, thanks for being here, and before I forget again, make sure you that are listening take one thing out of this. Get a pen, get a piece of paper, get ready, even if it's getting your phone, and just look for one little nugget out of this so that then you can start to implement it. Shift just by like 2 degrees every single day, and hey, everything's going to change for your life. But Ryan, as I was going into, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit who you are, what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Right on. Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me on, buddy. I know, like in public service, we do experience burnout from time to time, and sometimes it could be like the end cap on our career. But I appreciate you talking about the subject. So yeah, I live just outside of Phoenix in Arizona, United States, and I love it. Right now, it's about 70 degrees, if that, when we're just hanging out and enjoying the beautiful weather, and I love it. Everybody wants to go hiking right now, which is perfect for our state. Right now, we actually have like bright sunshine, perfect temperatures for hiking. Then, if you want to go skiing, snow skiing, or snowboarding, you just go like 2 to 3 hours north, and it's like fresh snow. We've got all the lakes people can go water skiing right now, so we've got like the best of all worlds. I freaking love it.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm a father. I'm a husband. I've been married for 20 years. I've been a firefighter paramedic for, let's see, 16 years now, and mostly with the same organization. I started out for about 18 months to 2 years with a really rural organization, really limited resources, but I learned a whole hell of a lot. And then I got hired with a larger organization closer to my house, which was fortunate for me because I was driving anywhere from like an hour to 90 minutes to go to work, but now it's like 20 minutes. So
Oh,
it's
nice.
awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so within my organization, I operate as firefighter and lead paramedic, and I'm also on the peer support team for those people in my organization that might need some emotional help or maybe even some physical help. Because not only am I on the peer support team, but I'm on the peer fitness team as well. So I'm a peer fitness trainer. So I'm aiming to like helping people refine their mentality and refine themselves physically. Um, I'm on the health and wellness committee as well as like technology committees, and I'm just trying to stay as involved as I can and engaged.
Yeah.
And I back in 2017, I was doing some homework on my own for like the peer support team to kind of gain some insight as to resiliency and what all goes into that. And I learned a really disturbing statistic for me that at the time in the United States, in 2017, that first responder, particularly firefighter suicides, outweighed that of line of duty deaths.
Mm.
And that kind of blew me away. It was kind of a gut check for me. And so I was like, wow, I just did a deep dive as to like, why is this happening? What can we do to fortify ourselves? You know, what is continuing this trend? And so that led me to, deep down the rabbit hole. And I just started reading all these articles, learning all of these different things. And the more I learned, I was like, you know what? I gotta share this stuff. Like learned information is great, but hoarded information doesn't really serve anyone. So I decided to start a company and start a podcast with that company called the Ignited Firefighter Podcast. And I'm in season 4 now of it. And it's basically everything and anything relating to the fire service. I mean, I talk about leadership, I talk about interview strategies, fitness, nutrition, resiliency, building habits, all of it. Anything that can be related to who we are as firefighters, I talk about it on the show. And I also run and host a book club. It's the Ignited Readers Book Club that's kind of going in tandem with that. And I'll have authors of the books that we read come on the show and we'll talk about their book and all the principles and different insights that they can offer. So it's been really cool to reach out to people, even such as yourself, on the other side of the planet, where we can connect on these things and talk about these things that aren't just affecting us in our little corner, but worldwide. And so it's really cool to connect and kind of purvey this idea that we're not alone in this effort. and
No.
and I think that's one of the biggest reasons that I've discovered, um, that pervade that statistic or that trend of firefighter suicides, is that they just felt alone. And
Yeah.
so if I can get people to just feel like you're not alone in the things that you're going through, I think that's at least something that I can do to help slow, if not stop, that trend.
No, that's awesome. I can totally relate to that. When you said about the burnout is what caused me to leave law enforcement.
Yeah.
And then I went down a journey of, again, researching and developing and self development. And I took a trip around. Actually, I came to Phoenix on it. Went to a trip 8,000 US miles on a motorcycle with a tent.
Oh wow.
From Northern California, where I'm originally from, all the way through Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Texas. Went all the way to Houston to see my uncle,
Wow.
and started coming back through New Mexico and stayed at a friend's place in northern Arizona, in northern Phoenix, and then to California, and then back up through Tahoe and back up. So I did a big loop through the Southwest, and
That's
I
cool.
realized through that is the communication as well. It was so. I left not knowing if I was actually coming back, not knowing if I was going to come back to my wife. Literally was completely lost, and uh, by communicating out what I was going through and what I was feeling with everybody with a purpose, like having a purpose when I went over there to refine myself and to get back to being able to trust people, because I'd lost trust. It was so important, and it impacted with so many people, and they told me their stories. I met law enforcement, met firefighters, met EMTs, all of it. And yeah, it was amazing, and so that resonates with me quite a lot. Ryan, so you're doing this. What's some experience you've had with burnout?
So, I mean, I've had some experience with burnout in that there's been a lot of volatility in the organization that I've been a part of, and in that, I mean, we have a lot of people coming and going,
Mm,
and we do have a smaller department per se for the area. So Phoenix Fire has like over 70 stations. I mean, they got a lot of stations.
yeah,
And then the other rural areas like Mesa are pretty big as well, close to 20. Um, but my department's five stations.
mm,
And, such a small, tight-knit organization where I know everybody's name that I work with. It's interesting how we can be so at odds sometimes. But I've worked there for, it'll be 15 years this next year. And in that time, I've seen six different fire chiefs.
yeah,
And yeah, so every time a fire chief comes in, they want to establish their own way of doing things, which I totally understand. I totally get. I support it. But when we're changing so often, it's like we lose our identity,
mm,
and you can only get fired up so many times about making these changes. Like this guy wanted to do things this way, and this guy wants to do things this way, and it's like at some point you just get to the point where it's like
yeah,
enough. Why can't we just be who we are and go from there and build on that and go through that? But so that was really one of the things that kind of pushed a lot of people into that burnout mode,
mm,
and I kind of caught myself being there too. And so it was one of the reasons why I wanted to be a part of the support programs that we offer. Not only, I mean, maybe for selfish reasons, maybe for me to learn a little bit about how do I build this resiliency? How do I get back to the point where I just loved coming to work every day? And it's not like I hate coming to work, but it's definitely different.
mm,
It's definitely not the same as it was the first day I stepped onto to the firehouse grounds and got on a fire truck. But I think we all have different burnout for different reasons. But for me, the biggest thing that I've seen is the volatility. And you can only get fired up over that thing so many times before you're just like, you know what, forget it. Just forget it. Like, I've spent so much time and energy in this thing, and then in a couple of years it's just gonna get erased and then written over anyway. So that was really tough for me.
Uh-huh. So how'd you work through that?
So I mean, honestly, I feel like the burnout, being able to identify, number one, being able to identify that I was kind of on that trend. For me, defining burnout is like the manifestation of exhaustion,
Mm,
right? Whether it's like physical, mental, spiritual, or emotional. And so, in some way, something negative is going to manifest in one of those ways. From what I've learned and the research that I've done, and just the people that I've talked to. Um, and so I I actually formulated a way to deal with that. I come from a Christian background, and so referencing the Bible, I Luke 2 chapter, or was it Luke chapter 2 verse 52 stuck out to me, and it talks about how Jesus grew in stature, wisdom, favor of man, and favor of God, and so those are the four categories that I could identify that I could take actionable steps in. Does that make sense?
makes total sense.
So, yeah. And so I kind of took those four categories and made them my own, in that I related the spiritual side to connection. I related the mental side to calibration. I related the physical side to condition, and then the emotional side to contribution. Like, what am I contributing to the people that I love and the people that I want to be close to? So all four of those quadrants help me identify things that I could work on specifically geared to those topics. So I've got several mentors online, and they operate in a similar way. They call their different categories different things, but those are the things. Those are the labels that I give that help me. So again, connection, calibration, condition, and contribution. And like I said, identifying the manifestation of that exhaustion, that burnout, is step one. You really have to identify that, hey, something's not right. Like, this doesn't feel as good as it did, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I always imagine like a burned out candle, like that black, crusty, burned out candle that's just done, right? Like,
Yeah.
figuratively and literally burnt out. And so, like, you think of a candle and you think of its purpose, right? It can provide a mild amount of warmth. It provides light, ambiance. Maybe you have a scented candle. Maybe it's a really pretty color that matches your drapes. I don't know. But there's layered purpose there, right? That candle provides.
Yeah.
And once it's done, there's no more purpose. It doesn't have purpose anymore. And so ultimately, it was that idea of reestablishing purpose. And like you talked about, before you went on your bike ride,
Yeah.
riding your motorcycle,
Purpose. What's the purpose of this trip?
establishing that purpose. Yeah, exactly, is what really helped shake me out of any apathy. And so within those four quadrants, I identified what I wanted within those quadrants. So, for example, condition. Let's say I wanted to lose 12 pounds for that category. Well, that's my purpose in that category, right? That's my goal. Now I can take steps back and identify what are my actionable steps that I can take towards doing that thing.
Yeah.
And the same goes for each quadrant. So, like, connection,
Creating
spiritual
structure, isn't
connection.
it?
If I want to Yeah, if I want to do that, I read scripture, I go to church, I read books specifically geared towards expanding my understanding. Maybe I'll read a book from a faith that has nothing to do with mine so that it just gives me a broader perspective, stepping outside my comfort zone, whatever it may be. But it's definitely all about establishing that purpose. And I feel like there's two steps that people need to take in order to do that. And number one, I think you identify what it is you want, right?
Yeah.
And then number two, you identify or you set up a system for accountability. So you identify what you want, and then you set up a system that's going to hold you accountable to getting that thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. I love it.
Okay.
It's so true. Without purpose, we have no passion. Without a purpose, we
Yeah,
we
agreed.
lose drive very quickly. And it's why my one of my programs and businesses and websites is called Create from Why. Why can be called purpose. It can be called multiple different things. But I believe that everybody has a true deep why, and you have all these other whys for different things. But it all drives from that true deep why that we have. My why, and I talk about it a lot on the podcast, is to create less pain for myself and others, so we create the best version of ourselves. And that's my statement. Like, I live by that. If it's not serving that, which can be served most of the time in some way or capacity, depending on how I focus on it, it's always, I can always serve that. Now, there's certain things that serve that even more. And even recently, I was talking to Dave Perez on the last episode. We were talking about that, and we were talking about that having that statement gives you that drive that you can always fall back onto, no matter if you can't find a why for conditioning or for connection or anything like that. It's going, okay, cool. What's that deep thing? So, what would you say your overarching why is, right? Or purpose?
So my overarching why is really tied in to uh, my company Ignited and the podcast and what that's really focused on. So honestly, when it comes to that, it's all about setting up, like I said, setting up those systems. But Ignited specifically is geared towards helping firefighters build trust and integrity through accountability. And so the only way I've learned to be accountable is to, like I said, establish a system of accountability, right? So I've established, like I talked about, those four quadrants. I operate under goals based on those four quadrants, and that helps me stay focused. Number one, but it also helps me stay accountable. I've built some tools and I've adapted some tools that I provide my clients that will help them be accountable to themselves.
Mm.
It's really nice to be accountable to other people. I mean, ultimately, that's what a gym membership is, right? Or not necessarily even a gym membership. That is a form of accountability, but hiring a personal trainer. So let's
Yeah.
say you pay $80 a month to hire a personal trainer. You've got that skin in the game. It's not cheap. Um, and if you're not going, your trainer is going to bug you. Hey, where are you at? Where are you at? Where are you at? And when you go there, they're gonna put you through the ringer. They're gonna put you through what it is you told them you want. And so it's like it's your duty to show up, and exercise that accountability and show up. And you take one step back from that. And I mentioned a gym membership. So let's say that's the level of accountability you're at. So you pay $15, $20 a month for access to this gym. That's kind of a lower level of accountability because some people are fine with just paying that money and then they never go.
Yeah.
You have to have something established that is going to force you into action,
Yeah.
right? So the tools that I've created and adapted and that I provide my clients are based on like the 12-week year. They're based on quarters. So like the first 3 months, the second 3 months, and so forth. So every 3 months, I establish a goal. So like the beginning of this year, I looked at all of my quadrants, my four quadrants, my connection, my calibration, condition, and contribution. I identified what I wanted to grow in each of those quadrants. And then I established a clear, specific, time-based goal, right?
Yep.
Basically a SMART goal,
Smart goals. Yeah.
for each of those quadrants. And that way, uh, I can go in. I have a spreadsheet that I've used, that I've outfitted and formulated, to where every day that I accomplish that thing or take that step towards that thing, I go in and I mark it in the spreadsheet.
Yep.
And so at the end of that
Keeps it accountable.
quarter, I can go back and I can look. Yeah, it's that's my system that I'm holding myself accountable to. Because like I said, it's really nice and fortunate to have other people hold you accountable. But ultimately, like, if you're not going to hold yourself accountable, I feel like it doesn't really matter. It
It's
really doesn't
it's so
matter.
interesting because I help people get into the police force here in New Zealand, and even around the world. I've helped
Hmm.
people in Australia and some people in the U.S. as well. And so there's one of the things that I do, and it's the biggest thing that I tell people. I was like, look, you want to be a first responder. Yes, you've got people that you help, and you got people that you can lean on, but at the end of the day, you need to be able to be accountable to yourself and be able to show up 100% yourself, because then and only
Yeah.
then can you then actually help people at the fullest. And as a police officer, a first responder, a firefighter, uh, if you can't turn up 100% on your own, you're not actually going to be able to give everything. You're not going to be reliable for other people. You're not going to be, so that accountability does, I love it. It's got to come from within. If it doesn't come from within, then then you're always relying on other people, and then other people are always going, well, why doesn't Chris just do his own thing? Why can't we rely on him? Why does he have, why did, we have to rely that he needs us? Yes, it's nice and it's a benefit to have other people, but if you can't do it on your own, it's really looking at, what it is that's stopping you from doing that. So no, I love that, Ryan. I guess the other question I have for you, when it comes around the burning out and that, how do you help the guys at the station? How do we, we're seeing still, lots of suicides in firefighters and first responders and police. And I was talking to Dave last one. We were talking about the fact of, well, and I know the stats coming out of the States when it comes to police officers is more cops take their own lives every year than are killed in the line of duty, just like you saw with firefighters.
Yeah.
How do we prevent that?
Yeah.
How do we change that?
Yeah, it's tough, man. Honestly, it's number one, talking about it, understanding that it's a thing that exists. Just like any problem. Like, if we show up on a fire, if we show up on a house fire, and we're unwilling to accept that that house is on fire, what good are we? We're not good to anybody. We're literally there to do a job, and if we don't accept that that thing is happening, we're not going to be able to complete that job. That's not even going to be, if we just kind of hold up a visor
No,
to our
there's no
eyes
fire
and be
there.
like, "That's not happening. It's not going on." That you can still feel the heat. You can still feel
Yeah.
the heat from it. And so, honestly, I think that's where, like, the building trust comes from. I mentioned, I want to go back real quick and just talk about the integrity that you had mentioned, and it's got to come from within. For me, integrity is that accountability in action.
Mm-hmm.
And when people see that happening, when people see that integrity manifested through that action, that builds trust.
Yeah.
It's not the only way, but it's definitely, and you know it and I know it, it's definitely one of the best, most effective ways to build trust.
It's one of the most
Um,
powerful.
yeah, absolutely. When it comes to helping your team, I feel like taking action in that integrity is that accountability in action. And one other thing that I think we, as police officers and firefighters, we have a hard time with is being vulnerable. You know, and I know it's kind of been a buzzword, for the past several years, but there's a lot of truth to it. And now, vulnerable doesn't mean that I share all of my medical problems with you, or any of that. It means that I'm willing to humble myself to you. You know, like, I'm willing to hand you the sword and have faith in you that you're not going to hit me with it, kind of
Yeah.
situation. So that vulnerability amongst your team, I think that vulnerability builds a lot of trust. Like, you can't expect people to be open if you aren't open. And And it's that expectation that I see a lot of times when I'm helping guys through like relationship problems with their spouse. You know, they have all these expectations that they've put there, but they're not willing to be vulnerable in anything and talk about anything. And they have all these crazy expectations
Mm.
where it's like, okay, well, I want her to be this way. I want her to like not go out and party. I want her to not drink. I don't like her looking at other dudes. But then the guy who's complaining to me about that is the guy who goes out and parties and drinks, and it's like you you don't get to demand that of her if you're not willing to be that yourself. Like you just
Yeah.
don't get to do that, you
You
know.
have to show up yourself completely. I've said this in the last few episodes actually. I've got my very first tattoo is honor and family on my arm. It's on my inner left
Nice.
bicep. And I remember like my wife's got lots of tattoos. Always, she had them before I did. I was like, oh, I always wanted one when I was younger. And she went to me. She's like, it has to be something that means something to you because it's on your body forever. I was like, yep, I get that.
Yeah.
So I waited and I waited and I waited, and we were on a trip overseas in Hawaii, I think it was. And I was like, honor and family. And she goes, what are you talking about? I go, that's gonna be my first tattoo.
Nice.
So we came home and I got it done because honor is that integrity for me. Honor is that you turn up fully, you give everything you have to yourself and then to everybody else, then to your family. But those are the two most important things, for myself, and that's what I live by. I remember you said, when we first started talking, is around, you guys had lots of chiefs come in, new chiefs, 6 new chiefs, and the time that you've worked at the station that you're at, or the area that
Hmm.
you work at. And then you said you started to get disheartened, and the troops started to get disheartened, and so how do we
Hmm.
take what we know and be able to help the troops, because we can't change the chiefs that come in. They're always going to want to come in, and they've got their ideas, they got their ways, just like you coach people completely different to the way I coach people. And if I came into your program, everybody'd be like, what the hell is Chris talking about? Like, it's
Yeah.
probably similar things but just said
Yeah.
and done in different ways. Same thing if you
Mm.
came into mine. So how do we help the troops, being one of the troops, how do we help one of the troops, help the troops to recognize that and not get disheartened, and the thing of, I just don't care, it's just another person's going to come in, and the things that you had said before.
Right. Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? And kind of the answer to that question is asking questions. I mean, I feel like as these different regimes have come in and they are very motivated to like push their agenda, and I'm not saying they're bad by any means. They're just very different, from each other. And so when you have the same all the soldiers are the same, but then the general keeps changing, it's exhaustive to adapt to what they want. But I think honestly, the biggest impact could be had if the troops, if the people on the ground, like if the people on the fire trucks were just asked their perspective.
Mm,
You know, if they were asked questions about what do you think is the biggest challenge we're facing here at this organization? Because they're the ones out in the field, right? They're
mm,
the ones that see the problem or see the effects of the problems, and it directly affects them, right? And so they're going to be the people who have the best, they're the closest to the problem. So they're going to be the ones best adept to finding a solution, adapting to that solution, figuring it out, and presenting it. I think the more people you invite to what you're doing, the more people you invite to have a seat at the table, if not for just 5 minutes,
mm,
if not for just
yeah,
tell me one thing that you are seeing that is a problem, and the one thing that we could do to fix it, even if it's
yeah,
something as simple as that. I think the buy-in that could be gained, making us feel like on the ground level that we're a part of that mission,
yes,
that's what's gonna instill that buy-in from us, and that's what's gonna like ignite that passion, and it's gonna make us want to be a part of that thing. because you and I know that, we can join committees all day long and we can voice our opinions in those committees. And then we send, what we've all agreed on. Like all of us have come together in this committee of like 12 people and we think this is a great plan. And then we submit it. And then administration just shuts it down. So we've done all this work towards this thing that we feel really good about and we're all motivated. And then it just gets shot to crap.
So
And
how
it totally
because
takes the
it's
wind out of our sail.
oh it totally takes it all out of it, and you get very disheartened, and then we get back to where it was before. People changing, and then you just kind of go, man, what's the point?
Yeah.
I'll just do whatever. How do we keep
Right.
without we can't change the leaders, and when they come in, we can hope that they do listen to these and they get things out of it and that. But it seems like the more in the last couple of years, the leaders are getting worse and worse in some ways. But they're just doing what they're doing, and we can have no control over it. We have control over ourselves. Uh, what can we
Yeah.
do at the ground level to inspire the other troops and inspire them to not dishearten at this thing of, we can't control what the chiefs do in that. We hope that they change and they see stuff. But how can we keep the troops, or how can you keep yourself inspired through all of that, not being heard, not getting, not getting your voice heard, and really it's just not getting heard. But stay in that place of, hey, I actually still love what I do. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep motivated. I'm going to keep driving. What do you think is the keys there?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. So we've all seen, everyone in public safety has seen the chain of command, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've all seen that tree that the chief is at the top, and then you got your city planners or whoever it is, and then assistant chiefs, excuse me. Then you're like your battalion chiefs, and in the fire side anyway, you've got your chief, your assistant chiefs, deputy chiefs, battalion chiefs, then your captains on the trucks, and then your crews on those captains. So honestly, if you boil it down to, if you follow that line down to the the single solitary firefighter, which is me, by
Yep.
definition, I'm a part of that crew. I have a captain, but I am a part of that crew. I don't make up the crew. I don't control the crew. I'm literally at the lowest level to incite any kind of change. But the one thing that I've learned is that if I can just do what I can with what I have where I'm at,
Mm-hmm.
it speaks volumes.
Yeah.
So like I turn the mirror and I focus on the things that I can do as an individual. Like my biggest thing to fulfillment, like my biggest thing that I tell myself is know thyself, right? From Socrates,
Mm-hmm.
know thyself. So
Yep.
I'm constantly on this quest of like looking within. What can I do to make sure that I'm the the firefighter I would want on my crew? Like
Yeah.
that's the question, right? And I'm 15 years, 16 years deep. I've Everybody on my crew is less senior than me. But I still go to work and I'm like, what can I do today? What attitude can I have or what actions can I do that will show this crew or that I'm operating under the ideal that I'm the firefighter I would want on my crew. And it's not about ego, in fact it's the exact opposite. Like if I can look within and serve the guys that I work with, because they're, it and I know it, ego abounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, eh, some people wouldn't dog me for just sitting in a recliner all day, not cooking, not cleaning anything, being grumpy because I'm the most senior guy, and he shouldn't have to do anything, like we're the new guys, we got to do everything. No, I still start cleaning, I still grab a mop, I still cook meals, I still do this stuff. And it's all under the ideal that I'm trying to be the firefighter that I would want on my crew. So I think about, what does that firefighter look like? Well, he doesn't push his ideals on you. He doesn't ridicule you. He doesn't make offensive jokes. He doesn't insult people. He is very physically capable. Like there's no doubt that he can do this job. There's no doubt that Like the ideal firefighter I would want on my crew, there is no doubt that he could, in full gear, pull me out of a fire in full gear.
Yeah.
That's the level of physical expectation I have for that
Yeah.
ideal firefighter. So again, it comes back to I can't expect that of my crew if I'm not willing to be that person, if I'm not willing to take those steps and be that person. So that's what helps me keep focused on that principle is am I, and it's a question I ask myself every time I go on duty, am I being the firefighter that I would want on my crew?
Do you transfer that over into your? I mean, 20 years married. That's decent. You know, that's a well longer than most people out there. I'm just coming up to 10 years here in a few weeks. A couple weeks actually. Speaking of that. But anyways, so do you transfer that over into your relationship and that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Like honestly, in all aspects, that's a principle that can be translated and templated across the board. And even helping like the guys on when I'm on the peer support team, even the guys that come to me and ask me for help with like relationship problems, that typically is what it comes down to. Like, are you being the guy that you think she deserves? Or are you, if the tables were turned, are you being the one that, would you have a problem with this or that or whatever? And that typically nails it, right
Yeah.
there off the bat. And because you can't expect to be the type of person who's like, well, I want to marry someone who doesn't smoke while you're puffing on a cigarette. You just, it's just
You have to show
hypocritical.
by.
It's just hypocritical at the,
Yeah, you have to
yeah.
show. You have to show by
So, I
action.
mean,
You know, yeah, yeah. You have to be the one who shows what you want and what you want to see. You have to actually
exactly
envision
right.
and actually do that.
Yeah. You have to be what it is you want. And honestly, like I've been doing a lot of reading and homework in regards to um, like frequency and how all that works scientifically.
Mm,
Honestly, it's one of those, it's the idea that like, let's say, well, when I first got hired, I loved my Tacoma, like Toyota Tacoma. That was like my dream truck, right? And that's what I wanted to buy myself. When I got hired full time, that was going to be, I knew the model, I knew the make, I knew the features, I knew everything that I wanted to outfit this Tacoma with. And once that was on my brain, guess what I saw driving around everywhere?
yep.
Toyota Tacomas, right?
Yep. Where
And
you
so
focus,
if
energy
you're
flows.
putting that in your brain, that's exactly right. So if you're literally, I guess figurative, it's not literally, if you're figuratively tuning your receiver to that frequency of that thing you want, then those people who are also living those principles are going to stand out. Everybody else is going to get foggy and static, turn into static, except
Mm,
those ones who are living by those principles. And they're going to be easy to identify. They're going to be right there in front of you, and it's almost like they're going to gravitate towards you. The same goes for business, whether it's like romantic relationships, business relationships, people who you want on your crew, no matter what it is, the more you can attune that proverbial frequency, the easier, I don't want to say easier, but the more clear that signal will become.
mm, yes, definitely. I totally 100% agree with that. You know, where we focus, we flow to. And so if you're focusing on the negatives, you're going to see the negatives everywhere. If you're focused on the positives, you're going to see the positives everywhere. You know, if we're in a shit state, you're going to feel like you're in a shit state and you're going to be around the people that are in the shit state. Um, so, Ryan,
Right.
you know, this has been absolutely amazing. I always love to promote other people, what they're doing in that. And I know you're doing some similar stuff to what I do or one of my businesses does, you know, helping people get into the police force. Yours is firefighting. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how people can get in touch with you.
Right on, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, I do have a website. It's www.ignitedff.com for Ignited Firefighter. And that's pretty much my handle across the board on all social media. If you go to Instagram, I'm that's like my primary uh, sharing platform for content is Instagram, and again, it's at Ignited FF. But you can find Ignited LLC on Facebook, and I run several groups there That's basically my hub for the online courses that I run. So I run the Ignited Recruit Academy, which is all for people who are looking to get into the fire service. I have a curriculum, a workbook. We do a reading assignment. I teach you how to, do recon for the department that you want to work for, so that you basically become a specialist on that organization. I teach you how to do interviews appropriately, like how to hone your interview skills, what you should talk about, the formula that you should use, how to adapt, if you freeze up or whatever, because we've all been there. Um, and then I also include a physical training portion of it, because that's like the basic minimum for entry when it comes to firefighting is being in physical shape. And so there's all those elements to that. But the other online course I'm working on is called Crew Builder, and it's for people who are already on with a fire service organization who are looking to take those steps that you talked about. Just those small steps where you can, with what you have, where you're at every day, and try to build that crew to the point where you're kind of living the movie crew lifestyle, right? Like you see those firefighter movies, and they love each other, and they go to each other's friends' birthdays and this and that, and they're hanging out with their kids, and in my experience, that has just not been the case. Like that is gone. Like everybody isolates in their own bunk room. Nobody knows each other's wives' names. And with some of the guys you work with, you don't even want them to know your wife's name, let alone that you are married. So, it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
so not that thing. So my whole goal is to like reinstitute that idea of brotherhood and community within the fire service um, community, I guess you could say. So we're trying to build Ignited through Facebook and there, and there's a online group, the Ignited Firefighter Podcast community. You can join. We dive deep every other week. I post episodes of the podcast every 2 weeks, and then stagger those with online Zooms where we get online and we all just talk about, we dive deeper into those topics. And so we can make those connections, build that community, and basically let everybody know that they're not alone. So we can
yes,
have an effect in bringing that devastating statistic number down, if not stamping it out altogether.
yeah. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
So Ryan, last question I like to ask everybody is, what is your top tip to self happiness?
Top tip to self happiness. Well, like I said, know thyself. If you don't know who you are, it's going to be impossible for you to know what you want. And furthermore, it's going to be that much more impossible for you to establish purpose and meaning in your life. If you don't know who you are, you're not going to know what you want. You're not going to know where you're going. You're just kind of floundering around in the dark. And honestly, one of the I'm an avid reader. I talked about when we were, I think just before we started, I talked about the book club that I run. So I'm an avid reader, and I run the Ignited Readers Book Club too, which is all the people in the Ignited community who want to read books that are gonna, expand our minds, our understanding, our emotion ability, like all of these different things that relate to our careers and to us as people. But one of the books that absolutely changed my life was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you've ever heard that book, but
Oh,
he was basically the direct challenger to Sigmund Freud at the time. Sigmund Freud's idea was that people do things out of a sense of pleasure. That's what motivates them. And Viktor Frankl said, no, 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 no. People do things for meaning. That's what motivates people, meaning and purpose. And he wrote this book. He wrote this book while he was being taken off to concentration camps in Nazi Germany. He survived through 3 concentration camps. His wife and unborn child were murdered. His parents were murdered. Everybody he knew was, falling apart and getting systematically executed. And he was able to not only write this idea and this theory that it's meaning that drives us, but he was able to perform studies inside the concentration camps that supported his work, and understanding that, you know, our circumstances might be dire, But regardless the circumstances, we always have a choice in regards to how we feel about that
Mhm.
circumstance, you know, or how
I
we perceive it.
I couldn't agree more with that. I'm a huge, and as we kind of wrap this up, I'm a huge why guy, and we talked a little bit about that before. But I'm a huge why guy, and the why has meaning behind it. The why, where it comes from, is so much meaning. Mine comes from everybody. I believe everybody's why comes from their childhood, and so it gives them
Yeah.
that underdriving purpose, and a lot of people, and meaning, and a lot of people, they end up actually driving from it from the negative sides of it, not from the positive sides. And once you shift it to the positive sides, it unleashes exponential growth and productivity. And so yeah, I fully full on that one. It's all about meaning. Yes, we drive for pleasure, but if there's no meaning to that pleasure, then what's the point of the pleasure?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, man. You got it. You nailed it.
So yeah. Any last words, Ryan, before we wrap up?
No, man, just thanks for having me come on. I mean, it's always cool to connect with people, you know, whether they're two doors down or several continents away. So this is really cool, man. I appreciate it.
It's awesome. I love technology in this way that makes it possible.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I've met many different people, and yeah, it's absolutely amazing the different stories that people have. So, uh, on that, remember, this is Fight the Burnout. We're all about taking these tools so you can prevent burning out, or you can overcome it. If you're in a peak state, if you're in a peak area, and you're moving really well, then you're going to be as productive as possible. That's working through the things that Ryan and I have talked about today. Taking those tools and actually implementing and applying them is the key. Because we can listen all day long and we take it in, and then we do nothing with it. But as we just talked about before, add some meaning to it. But we also obviously run a program that's called the Productive AF. And what it is it's taking you through and applying that meaning as well. So you can find that at www.createfromwhy.com, because we start with finding that why, to create purpose and meaning to your whole life. But you can also, if you're struggling with anything at all, or you want to just reach out to us, you can do that by emailing us at team@createfromwhy.com, and we will get back to you. But thanks again, Ryan, and thanks everybody for listening. And till next time, we'll talk to you soon. And remember, just take that one thing out of this episode.